My son kicked me out at Thanksgiving dinner. That seat is for my father-in-law. Get out. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw my name missing from the place card. It was a small thing. A folded piece of cream paper at the head of the table should have been there. I had sat at that head for 32 Thanksgivings. But this year, the candle flickered over empty linen, and my name wasn't there. And my son wouldn't meet my eyes. Thanksgiving has always been my holiday. Even after my wife, Marjorie, passed away, I kept it alive. The smell of sage and roasted turkey, the clatter of pans, the sound of football murmuring in the background, those traditions were stitched into our family like thread through fabric. My son, Daniel, used to stand on a chair beside me when he was 5, stealing olives off the tray and laughing like it was the greatest crime in the world. He'd call me, captain of the kitchen. I can still hear it. When Marjorie got sick, Daniel was the one who held my shoulders at the hospital and said, "We'll get through this, Dad. I've got you." And he did. After the funeral, he came by every Sunday. Brought groceries, fixed the loose gutter, sat across from me at the small kitchen table and talked about his job, his dreams, the house he wanted to buy one day. I believed him when he said family was everything. That's why, when he invited me to Thanksgiving at his new house this year, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, pride. He and his wife, Caroline, had moved into a beautiful 2-story home on the outskirts of town. Wide porch, big windows, the kind of place you imagine grandchildren running through someday. Caroline greeted me at the door with a practiced smile. She was always polite, always composed. She kissed my cheek lightly, as if careful not to smudge lipstick. "Happy Thanksgiving," she said. Her voice was warm, but not warm enough to linger. Daniel came from behind her, pulling me into a quick hug. Not the kind that sinks in. Just a pat on the back. "Dad, glad you made it." Of course I made it. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I carried in the pumpkin pie I'd baked that morning using Marjorie's old recipe card, the one stained with cinnamon fingerprints. I noticed Caroline glance at it, then at Daniel. A quick look, too quick. "It smells great," she said. "You didn't have to bring anything." I shrugged. "It's tradition." She smiled again, that same careful smile. Inside, the house buzzed with quiet elegance. Soft jazz played from unseen speakers. The dining table was set with matching gold-rimmed plates and crystal glasses. There were place cards arranged neatly in looping script. Caroline's parents were already seated in the living room. Her father, Thomas, stood when I approached. Tall, silver-haired, confident in the way of men who have never doubted their place in a room. "Good to finally see you again," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Heard a lot about you." I wasn't sure what that meant. Daniel hovered nearby, hands in his pockets. He laughed a little too quickly at Thomas's comments. He agreed a little too eagerly. I tried to ignore it. Families blend, roles shift. I told myself that's normal. But then came the first small crack. Caroline asked her father to carve the turkey. Now, I know that sounds trivial. But for decades, that had been my quiet honor. Not because I demanded it. Because everyone waited for me to do it. It was part of the rhythm. Thomas took the knife confidently, and everyone gathered around. Daniel stood beside him, nodding as Thomas explained the proper way to carve for presentation. I stepped back. No one noticed. Later, as we moved toward the dining table, I looked for my seat. I found Daniel's name, Caroline's, Thomas and his wife, Margaret. Even Caroline's younger sister had a place card. There was one empty setting near the corner. No name. I assumed it was mine. Perhaps the card had fallen. I didn't want to make a fuss, so I gently pulled out the chair. Before I could sit, Caroline's hand touched my arm. "Oh, actually," she hesitated. Daniel's jaw tightened. "That seat is for Dad," she said softly, nodding toward Thomas. For a moment, I thought she meant me. Then she clarified, "My dad." The room went very still. I smiled faintly. Of course, I didn't realize. Daniel stepped forward quickly, voice light but strained. "We just thought it made sense for him to sit there this year. He's hosting with us." Hosting. I glanced around the room. This was Daniel's house. The mortgage he'd worked so hard for. The kitchen he'd shown me proudly when they first moved in. I swallowed. "That's fine. Where should I sit?" Caroline looked toward the far end of the table. A smaller chair had been placed near the kitchen entrance, slightly apart from the main arrangement. "Oh, we set one up over there. It's cozier." Cozier. I walked toward it slowly. Each step felt heavier than it should have. As I passed Daniel, I caught a flicker in his expression, guilt. Embarrassment, I couldn't tell. He avoided my eyes. I told myself not to overthink it. It's just a chair, just a seat, but something inside me whispered, it's not just a seat. Dinner began. Conversation flowed around me like a current I couldn't quite step into. Stories about Caroline's childhood, memories I wasn't part of, inside jokes I didn't understand. Every now and then, Daniel would glance my way and offer a tight smile, as if checking a box. I tried to join in. I asked Thomas about his recent retirement. He answered politely, but his attention always drifted back to Daniel. At one point, Margaret leaned across the table and said, "It's so wonderful that Daniel has such a strong father figure now." Now, the word hung in the air. I waited for Daniel to correct her. He didn't. Instead, he cleared his throat and reached for his wine glass. I felt the warmth drain from my face. Caroline quickly changed the subject, laughing lightly. But I saw it, the exchange, the subtle shift, and then came the moment I can't forget. As dessert approached, Daniel stood up. He tapped his glass gently with a spoon. "Before we finish," he said, "I just want to say how grateful I am this year." My heart softened despite everything. He continued, voice steady. "I'm grateful for guidance, for leadership, for the people who've helped me become the man I am." He turned, not toward me, but toward Thomas. "And especially for you," Daniel said quietly. The room filled with warm smiles. Applause. Caroline reached for her father's hand. I sat there, fingers wrapped around Marjorie's recipe card in my pocket. And that was when Daniel finally looked at me. Really looked at me. His expression wasn't confused. It wasn't torn. It was resolved, as if he had already made a decision long before this dinner began. I felt the air thicken in my lungs. He took a slow breath. "Dad," he said, just that, one word, but the way he said it told me everything was about to change. "My son kicked me out at Thanksgiving dinner. That seat is for my father-in-law." "Get out, Dad," he said. The room stilled. There are moments in life when time doesn't stop, but it thins. Sounds fade, faces blur. You notice the smallest details. The way the candle wax had dripped onto the tablecloth, the faint ticking of the wall clock behind me, the smell of nutmeg from the pie cooling on the counter. Daniel cleared his throat. "I think, maybe it would be better if you headed home." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. "Head home," I repeated gently, careful not to let my voice shake. "It's Thanksgiving." His jaw tightened. He didn't look angry. He looked uncomfortable, like a man rehearsing a speech he never wanted to give. Caroline placed a hand on his arm. Not urgently, not nervously, steady. "We just feel," she said softly, "that tonight should be about bringing both sides of the family together, peacefully." Peacefully. I glanced around the table. No one was arguing. No one was upset. I had barely spoken. Thomas folded his hands, watching me the way one watches a difficult but necessary conversation. Daniel inhaled. "Dad, earlier, when you tried to sit at the head of the table, it made things uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. I thought about that word. About how lightly it rolls off the tongue. How easily it can erase a lifetime. "I didn't realize," I said quietly. "There wasn't a card." "That's kind of the point," Daniel replied, and something in his tone hardened. "Things are different now." Different. I looked at my son, the same boy who used to grip my finger when crossing the street. The same teenager who cried into my shoulder after his first heartbreak. The same man who once told me he didn't know what he'd do without me. Different. "I never meant to cause a problem," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "If I did, I'm sorry." Caroline's mother shifted in her chair. Someone coughed. The soft jazz continued playing in the background, absurdly cheerful. Daniel stepped closer to me. "This isn't about one seat," he said under his breath. "It's about boundaries." Boundaries. I nodded slowly, trying to understand when I had crossed one. "I've always tried to respect your space," I said. "I don't come by unannounced. I don't interfere." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's not that simple." "Then help me understand." There it was, the question hanging between us. Help me understand. He hesitated. His eyes flickered toward Thomas again, just for a second, but I saw it. Thomas didn't speak. He didn't need to. Daniel straightened his shoulders. "You still treat me like I'm 12, he said. "Like this is your house. Your tradition. Your holiday." I blinked. "This was our tradition," I replied gently. "Your mother and I built it for you. And I'm building something new now," he said, louder than before. "With my wife." Caroline squeezed his arm again, almost reassuringly. I felt something inside me shift. Not break, not yet, but shift. Like a picture frame sliding slightly off-center. I never wanted to take that from you, I said. I was proud of you tonight. Of this house. Of what you've built. He didn't respond. Instead, he glanced at the door. Dad, please, just go home. We'll talk later. There it was. Not shouted. Not dramatic. Just final. I looked around the table one more time. Margaret avoided my gaze. Caroline looked composed, almost relieved. Thomas met my eyes steadily, neither hostile nor kind. Just certain. Certain of his place. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the worn edge of Marjorie's recipe card. Cinnamon smudges under my thumb. For years, I believed family was something you carried together. That even when roles changed, respect remained. But respect doesn't vanish all at once. It fades in small omissions. A missing place card, a carving knife passed to someone else, a toast redirected, and finally, a door. I stood slowly. Of course, I said. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable. The word tasted bitter now. Daniel exhaled, as if relieved. I'll call you, he added quickly. We'll figure things out. I nodded. I picked up the pumpkin pie from the counter. No one stopped me. Leave it, Caroline said lightly. We already have dessert covered. I hesitated. Then I set it back down. I walked toward the front door. My coat felt heavier than when I'd arrived. The house seemed quieter, though the music still played. At the threshold, I paused. For a brief second, I hoped, foolishly, that Daniel would call out. That he'd say, wait. Stay. He didn't. Instead, I heard Thomas's voice behind me, low but audible. It's important for a man to establish his own household. A man. I stepped outside into the cold November air. The door closed softly behind me. Not slammed, just closed. The porch light flickered above, casting long shadows across the yard. I stood there for a moment, listening to the muffled laughter inside. It sounded distant already, like a memory. I walked to my car slowly. As I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Daniel. It wasn't. It was a text from Caroline. We hope you understand. This is what's best for Daniel's growth. I stared at the screen. Growth. As if I were some obstacle he had outgrown. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Instead, I slid the phone back into my pocket. When I got home, the house greeted me with silence. The kind that presses against your ears. Marjorie's photo still sat on the mantel. I stood in front of it for a long time. I must have missed something, I whispered. I replayed the past year in my mind. The fewer Sunday visits. The way Daniel had started consulting Thomas about financial decisions. The subtle jokes about old-school parenting. The small red flags I had ignored because love makes you generous. I walked into the kitchen and turned on the light. The table was already set. 2 plates. I had set one out of habit. Slowly, I removed the second plate and placed it back in the cabinet. That's when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Daniel. A voicemail. I didn't listen to it right away. I stood there, staring at the blinking notification, feeling the weight of something larger than one dinner. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about Thanksgiving. This was about replacement, about erasure, about deciding who gets to be called father in a house where there is only room for one. My hand hovered over the screen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear what my son had to say.